Okay, part 4. Bear with me. We're getting there. 1994, California passes Prop 187. I remember because I lived in California then, and I voted for it, which denied certain benefits in public education to illegal alien children. The reason was that California was at the beginning of starting to lose a buttload of money, and the money needed to go to better things, and was pissing away to non-citizens, and it was just the tip of the iceberg. Citizens at that time, non-citizens at that time, were eating up education dollars, making school classrooms too big, which affected how children were taught. The lunch program, the money was just pouring in, and they were the healthcare issues, emergency care issues. It was just piling on and piling on, piling on. It was just one step in the ladder to try to reduce the spending and to force people's hand into doing something about illegal immigration by making it hurt. Sometimes it has to hurt. Oh, what about the children? What about children? Now, they can be taught on their own. They need public school for that. At least certain benefits we were wanting to restrict. Not all benefits, but certain benefits. But guess what? It passed. But in 1999, the Ninth Circuit, or as I like to call them, the Ninth Circus Court, unconstitutionally overturned the will and desire of the people of California. And guess what? It wasn't the last time. They did it again with Prop 8 in 2012 with regard to gay marriage and the banning of that. Because, you know, the Ninth Circus Court knows better than the people of California. And the will of the people is superseded somehow constitutionally by a bunch of deep state legislators on the bench in the Ninth Circuit Court. 1996, James Banks publishes Multicultural Education, Transformative Knowledge and Action. Ooh, it sounds so progressive. We've already discussed at length about the evils of multiculturalism, which basically is teaching kids that your American culture is no better than other cultures around the world. So don't think of America as exceptional, and therefore don't treat other people from other places with different skin tones and accents as if they are inferior to you, as if that was a big problem with kids in school, and a whole bunch of other nonsense that's meant to knock America down a notch and to equivocate as much as we can for purposes of globalism. 1996, Oakland, California School District proposes that Ebonics be recognized as the native language of Black children. Nobody I remember ever commenting on the politically incorrect point that the word Ebonic, the root word of Ebonics is eben or ebony. We won't go there. But talk about the soft bigotry of low expectations. There you have it in a nutshell. 1998, California passes Prop 227. Here we go. Requiring all public schools to teach in English. Guess what? That was repealed in 2016 with California's Multilingual Educational Act. They just can't stand prosperity, can they, in California? Everything that's done to improve, dashed on the rocks. 1998, the Higher Education Act requires teacher report cards. And now we're going to make sure that the teachers are teaching the way we want, not just the children are learning the way we want. 2000, Diane Ravitch publishes Left Back, A Century of Failed School Reforms. Wonderful book criticizing progressive education policies. And, you know, we can't have that, can we? Everyone took pot shots at this book, but it holds up, folks. 2000, also Santa Fe School versus Doe. Supreme Court rules that student-led prayer prior to football games violates the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. They're even going after sports. 2002, the Supreme Court rules certain school voucher programs are constitutional. Okay, good. That's big of you. How could it not be? 2005, U.S. District Court of Pennsylvania rules teaching intelligent design as an alternative to evolution violates the First Amendment. So you can't have creationism or intelligent design have any place in school where so that evolution can rule the roost, can rule it all, and be the unopposed theory of who we are and how we got here. Now look, I may not believe in creationism any more than a left-wing ideologue does. You don't know is the point. Whether I do or not, are we so afraid? If evolution was actually more logical and true, why would the proponents of it be so afraid to have somebody come along with something that could be easily defeated? If it isn't easily defeated, that explains their fear. This is all about what are they afraid of and what do they want to control than it is the efficacy or the truthfulness of a theory or not. 2009, the Common Core State Standards Initiative is launched. Common Core. We'll talk about that. 2013, Chicago votes to close 50 schools, the largest mass school closing in U.S. history. It is followed by large-scale closings in Detroit, Philadelphia, and D.C. Thousands of teachers also are laid off over the subsequent years. I wonder why that is. Was it because of the Great Recession? Maybe, because money wasn't going to schools, but maybe because these overbloated schools couldn't afford their budgets in the first place. 2013, the Supreme Court rules affirmative action is constitutional, only, though, if it is narrowly defined. And who gets to define it? Narrowly or otherwise. What is narrowly defined affirmative action? What is widely defined affirmative action? 2014, Supreme Court of California stops attempts to create laws regarding teacher tenure, seniority, and dismissal. In other words, God forbid these horrible left-wing dictatorial professors and teachers in California's schools should be dismissed for cause because they happen to have seniority or tenure. Can't get rid of them. Bad teachers, can't get rid of them. That way they can continue teaching their garbage to our children. By law. 2014, Hispanic children in school outnumber white children for the first time. Emblematic of nothing, except probably most of that is due to illegal immigrants. 2014, Minnesota State High School League if I could just read my own writing, that would be nice. The high school league votes to allow transgender students to join female sports. They are the 33rd state to do so, and probably not the last, and the beginning of that little problem where the best girl on sports teams is now a dude. 2016, federal government instructs schools to allow transgender students to use bathroom of gender they identify with, of the gender they identify with. It's not law, but let's see, not. I should have been a doctor. But fines, lawsuits, and a withholding of federal aid is threatened, even though it's not law, and struck down by Trump in 2017. 2017 Supreme Court rules schools must offer individualized education based on a child's circumstances. What the does that mean? Well, that's kind of weird because I thought they were against individualism. Shouldn't they be taught as a collective? But now we're teaching them not because they're individuals, but because they have circumstances that are unique. Let's talk about all that history and how it led to today's educational issues. One mother wrote a blog or an article about how she felt what caused her child's problems in schools today. She wrote that Horace Mann in 1842 in Massachusetts started the compulsory grammar school education outside the house. We talked about that. It included fines to the parents and removal of children from the homes. They were not fooling around in Massachusetts back in 1852. This spread to every state. Classes began to be broken down by age, which was part of the Prussian model that many of the philosophers on the left went to Prussia, went to Germany to learn this and bring back to the United States and then teach others who carried that torch forward into the 20th century. The attendance requirement and the age requirement stretched into the teen years. The one-size-fits-all education problem began. Reduction of parental control of learning. It resulted in children at the whim of teachers. Whoever was in charge of government, school boards, and principals was in charge of your kid instead of parents. And regulations became far more stricter regarding education. She's chronicling how we got worse and worse educationally. Publicly funded schools are forced to become more efficient due to budget constraints and growing class sizes. So they have to fund the schools from taxes. This leads to a reduction of individualized educational concepts, what we were just talking about. It also leads to a reduction of religious aspects in schools, the secularization of the classroom. And then, of course, she jumps ahead to No Child Left Behind, the current condition under which schools are in, which was meant to close the achievement gap. Instead, it has dumbed down students by promotion to the next grade without actually mastering the materials before being promoted. They're required to pass the grade in the first place. We've allowed them to slip on through. That way they're not left behind, I guess. No matter how stupid they might be, at least they're not left behind, God forbid. It gave federal government more power in an area that was meant to remain at the state level, meaning the feds run education more than the states. Much like the Elementary and Secondary Education Act did in 1965. It gave the power more to the government, the federal government, than it had previously where it belonged in the states. It tried to hold teachers and schools accountable for student achievement levels, but it failed at that too. States began to adopt Common Core standards in 2010. This forced children to learn shortcuts in math, for example, whether they needed the shortcuts or not. instead of learning how to figure things out for themselves, this was more of a hand-holding. It gave emphasis to emphasize skills over content. It emphasized process over product, and relative standards over absolute ones. Remember sliding scale. Oh, if it feels like it's the right answer, Johnny, it's good enough. It rendered 12 years of school useless and put more demand on post-secondary schooling, resulting in droves unable to think critically. Droves of kids. Society cannot produce great thinkers any longer. Surges in college attendance and more free government money to help pay for it. College graduates today have comparable education only to high school graduates of just 20 years ago. That's the result of today's education. In science and math, we talked about how the Common Core emphasized skills over content, process over product, relative standards over absolute. It focused also on practical skills while ignoring quality. In the humanities, content instead of reading poetry or great literature. Students read journalistic nonfiction and develop research skills instead of reading for meaning and writing clearly. They read for bias and they write fluff. In history, instead of learning actual history, they learn history skills, draining it of all meaning and relevance, simply processing data, but not actually thinking about anything, what it might mean. Now we'll talk about a little bit about anecdotal evidence. In fact, we'll do that in part 5, I believe is where we're at. Stick with it.